in the shadow of marble columns that once pierced the heavens. A colossal empire stretched from the misty shores of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, its legions marching in unbreakable formation, its aqueducts channeling life-giving water to cities teeming with 1,000,000 souls. This was Rome at its zenith, an eternal dominion forged through centuries of conquest and ingenuity, where emperors were deified and the roar of the Colosseum echoed the pulse of a civilization unmatched in history. Yet, even as the Pax Romana bathed the world in relative peace during the 2nd century AD, subtle fissures began to snake through the foundations of this mighty edifice. The air in the forums grew thick with whispers of distant threats, and the golden eagles atop Roman standards cast longer shadows under a sky that seemed to darken. No one in those bustling streets, amid the clatter of chariots and the aroma of spiced wines, could fathom that the slow unraveling had already begun a quiet erosion that would span generations, transforming glory into ruin without a single cataclysmic blow. Picture the daily rhythms of life in this vast realm before the whispers of decline grew louder. Merchants haggling in the Forum Romanum under the watchful gaze of towering temples, their voices mingling with the scent of fresh-baked bread and incense from altars dedicated to Jupiter and Mars. Farmers in the fertile valleys of Italia tilled soil enriched by volcanic ash, harvesting wheat that fed armies and civilians alike, while slaves from conquered lands toiled in villas, their chains clinking softly against the backdrop of birdsong and flowing fountains. In the provinces, legionaries drilled in fortified camps, the metallic clang of swords on shields punctuating the crisp morning air, instilling a sense of unbreakable order. Families gathered in bathhouses steaming with hot springs, discussing politics and philosophy amid the murmur of water and laughter, oblivious to the creeping strains on the empire's borders. Trade ships creaked across the Mediterranean, laden with olive oil, silk, and spices, fostering a web of prosperity that bound diverse peoples under the Roman eagle. But beneath this veneer of stability, the first invisible threads of fragility were weaving themselves into the fabric of society, waiting for the right pressures to pull them taut. The early warning signs emerged like faint cracks in a grand mosaic, almost imperceptible amid the empire's enduring splendor. By the late 2nd century, under emperors like Marcus Aurelius, the Antonine Plague swept through the legions returning from eastern campaigns, its feverish grip claiming millions and leaving villages eerily silent, fields untended, and granaries half empty. The economy, once buoyed by endless conquests, began to falter as the costs of maintaining vast frontiers mounted. Inflation gnawed at the value of the denarius, forcing artisans in urban workshops to butter. Amid rising prices, their hammers falling with a heavier, more desperate rhythm. Barbarian tribes, stirred by climatic shifts that turned northern lands harsher, pressed against the Rhine and Danube limes, their war cries echoing faintly across the rivers like distant thunder. Internal power struggles simmered too, with pretenders to the throne emerging in the provinces, their ambitions fracturing the unity that had long defined Rome. Yet these omens were dismissed as temporary ills, mere ripples on the surface of an ocean that seemed boundless. No one yet grasped that they heralded a tide that would inexorably rise. As the 3rd century dawned, tension coiled tighter within the empire's core, transforming subtle unease into palpable instability. The crisis of the 3rd century unleashed a torrent of chaos. Over 50 emperors rose and fell in just 50 years. Many assassinated in the dim corridors of palaces or betrayed on blood-soaked battlefields, their reigns marked by the acrid smoke of civil war. Armies, once loyal to the state, pledged allegiance to their generals, marching not against foreign foes, but against fellow Romans. The clash of Pella and Glady resounding through Italia's hills. Economic woes deepened. Hyperinflation rendered currency worthless. Bartering became the norm in markets where once silver flowed freely, and the scent of rotting produce mingled with the desperation of starving crowds. Plagues returned, like the Cyprian plague, emptying cities and leaving streets haunted by the wails of the bereaved and the silence of abandoned homes. Borders buckled under relentless incursions, Goths raiding the Balkans, Persians sacking Antioch, their hooves thundering across once secure lands, signaling that the empire's grip was slipping, inch by inexorable inch. Key decisions in this era of turmoil accelerated the downward spiral, often born of desperation rather than foresight. Emperor Diocletian, ascending in 284, AD sought to staunch the bleeding by dividing the empire into a tetrarch of 4 co-rulers, governing vast quadrants, hoping to bring efficiency to an unwieldy behemoth, but this fractured command sowed seeds of rivalry the errant, imperial councils thick with suspicion and whispered plots. He reformed the military, swelling the ranks with barbarian recruits whose loyalties lay with gold rather than Rome, their foreign accents echoing in barracks once filled with Italian voices. Taxation soared to fund these legions, crushing peasants under levies that left farms, fallow and villages depopulated. The creak of overburdened carts on dusty roads, a lament for lost prosperity. Constantine the Great, victorious at the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, embraced Christianity, shifting the empire's spiritual axis and alienating traditional pagans. While relocating the capital to Byzantium renamed Constantinople drained the west of vital resources, leaving Rome's ancient heart exposed and vulnerable. These choices, meant to preserve, instead hastened the unraveling, as if tightening a noose around a weakening neck. The moment the system truly began to fail, materialized not in a thunderous crash, but in a series of shattering defeats that exposed the empire's hollow core. In 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople, Gothic hordes overwhelmed Emperor Valens' forces. The screams of dying legions and the twang of breaking bows marking a turning point where Roman invincibility shattered like fragile pottery. Theodosius I's division of the empire in 395 AD into eastern and western halves formalized the split, with the west inheriting depleted coffers and exposed frontiers, the wind whistling through undermanned forts along the Rhine. As the 5th century unfolded, barbarian migrations intensified, driven by Hunnic pressures from the east, their wagon trains rumbling across frozen rivers in winter, breaching defenses that once seemed impregnable. The sack of Rome in 410 AD by Alaric's Visigoths sent shockwaves through the civilized world. Flames licked at eternal monuments, the cries of terrified citizens piercing the night, as looters carted away treasures amassed over centuries. By then, the empire's mechanisms, administrative, military, economic, creaked under irreversible strain, teetering on the brink of total collapse. Human consequences unfolded in waves of suffering that scarred the landscape and souls of the Roman world. Provinces once vibrant with commerce descended into anarchy. In Gaul and Hispania, Bagode, peasant rebels rose against absentee landlords, their torches illuminating nights filled with the crackle of burning villas and the desperate flight of refugees. Plagues and famines ravaged populations already thinned by endless wars, leaving skeletal figures wandering ghost towns where laughter had once echoed, the air heavy with the stench of unburied dead. Social bonds frayed as the elite retreated to fortified estates, abandoning the plebs to barbarian mercy, fostering a climate of fear where every stranger's approach brought the metallic tang of impending violence. Children grew up amid ruins, their games played in the shadows of toppled columns, inheriting a world where education and culture withered like untended vines. The breakdown permeated every lay of slaves revolting, soldiers deserting, citizens converting en masse to Christianity seeking solace in a crumbling reality, painting a tapestry of despair that no imperial edict could mend. The Vendels' sack of Rome in 455 AD epitomized the empire's terminal agony, their ships docking unopposed as they plundered for 14 days. The clatter of stolen gold and the wails of captives underscoring Rome's impetus. Germanic kingdoms sprouted in the west. Visigoths in Aquitaine, Franks in Gaul, their kings donning Roman titles amid the ruble, blending conqueror and conquered in a haze of cultural fusion. The deposition of young Emperor Romulus Augustalis in 476 AD by Odoacer, a barbarian chieftain, marked the symbolic end. No fanfare accompanied it. Just the quiet handover of insignia in a Ravenna palace shrouded in autumn mist, as if the empire exhaled its last breath, unnoticed. Yet the East endured as the Byzantine Empire, preserving Roman law and grandeur in Constantinople's domed basilica, where Grecians replaced Latin orations. This bifurcation highlighted the West's vulnerabilities, poorer, more exposed, while the East adapted, its walls resounding with the calls of muezzins centuries later. Long-term echoes of Rome's slow death reshaped the contours of human civilization, birthing the medieval era from its ashes. Feudal systems emerged in the fragmented West, where local lords wielded power in hilltop castles, their oaths echoing the client-patron bonds of old Rome, amid fields worked by serfs whose lives mirrored the colony of late antiquity. The church rose as a unifying force, its monasteries preserving scraps of classical knowledge in illuminated manuscripts, the scratch of quills on parchment a faint reminder of lost libraries. Trade routes atrophied, cities shrank to shadows of their former selves, the silence of overgrown forums broken only by the toll of church bells summoning the faithful. Yet Roman innovations persisted, roads facilitating pilgrimages, aqueducts still quenching thirst, legal codes influencing emerging kingdoms, their stones whispering of a legacy that refused complete oblivion. The fall seeded the Renaissance, centuries later, as scholars unearthed buried texts, igniting a rebirth amid the ruins. In the quiet aftermath, as vines crept over fallen arches and wolves prowled abandoned amphitheaters, the world pondered the fragility of even the mightiest realms. Rome's decline, a mosaic of intertwined failings, political rot, economic decay, military overreach, and societal shifts, served as a cautionary specter, its lessons etched in the eroded marble of forgotten monuments. The air once filled with triumphal marches now carried only the wind sigh through empty colonnades, a haunting reminder that empires, like men, are mortal. But in that mortality lay the seeds of transformation, for from Rome's protracted agony sprang new orders, new faiths, new horizons. As the sun set on the eternal city, it rose elsewhere, illuminating paths unforeseen, proving that collapse, though inevitable, is but a chapter in the endless narrative of history. Yet one wonders, in the stillness of those twilight years, if the Romans sensed the encroaching void, or if they too believed their world impervious to time's relentless march.